Jeff Jansen, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. It's so great to finally meet you. I've been reading a lot of your work. I admire all the content that you put out, and I think you and I have a passion, a true deep passion for helping coaches out there, and hopefully we can do that in today's conversation. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I look forward to a great discussion with you.
Yeah, I love your books. I love your stuff. I first want to start, before we get into some more of the nuances and some of the deeper material, I kind of want to first start with, we haven't had a conversation with a guest yet about, what are the first steps coaches should take, whether they're a new coach at a brand new program or they're stepping in as a first time ever head coach. I'm curious, Jeff, when you see this or you're working with a coach, what are the first steps coaches should know if they want to build and sustain a championship culture? Where should they start first?
Yeah, I think you have to have a realistic understanding of what the current culture is. If a lot of times you're being a coach, you're hired either because the previous coach didn't have a championship culture and things were just really not pleasant at all for parents, for kids, for administrators, for the coach. So you're coming into perhaps a corrosive or toxic culture. So you have to understand that. Or you may have a situation where a coach is really successful and they moved on to another job. So I think having a really important view of the lay of the land before you come in and honestly even before you accept the job. I think that's something that's important, is when you're looking at jobs, to look at the administrators that you're working with. What's their vision? What are their values? What are their standards and expectations? Same thing with the parents. What is their vision? What are their values? What are their expectations? And if you see or feel a misalignment there with, hey, I'd really love to take this to a great high level and compete for championships, and they're more, well, we've got our vacations and we want to make sure that our kids do a lot during the off season, and we're more about the gear and looking good and all that. If there's a mismatch even before you accept a job, I think it's important to trust your gut with that. So this alignment between vision, values, and standards, understand what yours are, and then understand what the job opportunity might be. And if there's not alignment there, it's going to be better for everybody on the front end to say, you know what? That's fine. This is your vision, value, standards. This is mine. We need to find people who are a good fit for it. So I think understanding what is the previous culture, what are the expectations of the people involved, and once you understand that and feel like, okay, I can fit with that and I can navigate within that, then I think you have a chance of being successful.
So let's say that we have some alignment. We feel like this is a good place for me. We step in, we take the offer. What are some kind of key things to do right away? I would imagine a mistake that a new coach could make, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that they step in and they want to jam all their content down the throats of everybody around them. This is how we're going to do things. We're going to change things now. Boom, 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 boom. Walk me through where's that line, kind of that compromise of, I have all this stuff, yet I know I'm the new guy or girl here. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's really understanding who the key players are in the new environment that you're in. So is the AD a key player, and understanding the influence that they have on the culture and what their expectations might be, understanding who some of the key parents might be, and understanding who some of the key senior athletes might be as well. And I think really understanding who those key people are, developing a good, strong relationship with them, trying to understand what they see as what's going to be successful, understand maybe what hasn't gone well in the past, and to really get the buy-in of those key constituents. Because if you know that they're on your side, they're going to have a ripple effect and get the dominoes tipping in the direction that you want them to tip. If you've got some key people who are not a big fan of yours, then that's going to be a problem, short term and potentially long term. So I think it's identifying who those key people are. And yes, as you say, you may want to take this program up here but it's going to take a while. It's probably not going to happen overnight. And what you have to look at are what are those one or two or three short-term steps. Maybe we want to get up to this staircase, it's 20 steps high. We can't go to step 20 right away, especially if it's been a toxic or corrosive culture. That's probably not going to work. It's probably going to turn people off. So, what are those one or two or three key initial steps that if we can identify those and start making some progress on those, we know that we're making steps in the right direction toward that ultimate goal, but we can't jump to step 20 right away. So those would be my suggestions of trying to really understand who are the key people and what are the short-term realistic wins that we can get right away that I know are helping us make progress toward where I'd eventually like to go.
What I'm also hearing, Jeff, is that a piece of advice is to maybe be a little more observant. First year, sit back a little bit. Don't not coach. That's not what we're saying, but be really observant. Really be aware and kind of look around. Stay after practice. Maybe watch from a different spot in the gym. Being observant might be a great place to start for a while.
Yeah, I think it's really important to that. I think for a lot of people who've gone to college, you know that first day of class when they're outlining the syllabus and these are the expectations and this is what we're looking for. If you're sitting in that class and you're like, this is not for me, then you know, okay, I've got to find another class. Or if you're sitting in that class and you're excited, then it's going to be a different story. And I think that's the same thing before you're taking a job or in the early stages is understanding, okay, yeah, is this going to be a good fit or is this not going to be a good fit? And really having as much of a complete picture of everything as possible, I think is just going to be tremendously helpful for you and the people that you're working with.
Okay, awesome. So first, I need to decide if this environment's right for me. Why is the coach leaving? Then when I step in, I want to be observant and create some little small wins along the way before we get to where we want to get to. I think after that, Jeff, when I do a lot of work with team consulting, what I'm helping some coaches with is creating a culture. And culture is this buzzword. And what does it mean? And we kind of define and go through that. We can go through that today if you'd like. But one of the things that I'm finding that not a lot of coaches are doing, and maybe you're seeing this, maybe you're not at the college level, but mostly for me in the high school level, I'm seeing a lot of coaches not have things like a mission statement or a vision or core values. And so I have this document that I use called an MVP process. What's your team's mission? What's our vision? And what are our principles or behaviors to help us get there? And candidly, Jeff, it blows my mind how many coaches have not taken the time to do this. I don't know if it's the same at the college level or not, but walk me through. Again, we're kind of thinking about the coach that just took over a program or first time head coach. Now that we've got we've got the people in place, the next step would be to establish, in my mind, a clear vision and value or mission. Walk me through kind of your process. Do you see that same thing at your level? How can we help coaches kind of get that first level down?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's probably a similar process for me. And I've mentioned it already, the vision, the values, the standards. So what is our vision? What are we trying to accomplish here? And most people obviously think of wins and losses, and that's a really big part of it, and championships as well. But at the same time, hey, we just competed against someone. What do we want them thinking and saying after they've competed against us? What kind of impression do we want to have? Hopefully they competed with class, and hopefully they competed in a way that honored the game, but hopefully they competed in a way that they were relentless. They did not give us anything. We had to earn every single thing that we got from them. So it's those kinds of things in putting together that vision too is what kind of team do we want to be? And then not just on the court or on the field or track or pool or whatever it may be, what kind of team do we want to be at our school? What kind of reputation do we want to have with the other students and with the teachers that are here? What kind of team do we want to be in our own community? Someone who hopefully is reaching out and giving and involved in a variety of different ways. So that vision is not just an athletic vision, it's a vision of how do we fit within our school? How do we fit within our community as well? So I think those are really important things to look at. What do we want to be? What do we want to be known as with the key people that we want to serve or the community that we want to be a part of? So I think that's important to definitely take a look at and how that fits. And then, as you said, the values. Okay, what are the values that we need to have if we're going to have that kind of impact? And really taking a look at what are those values. That's just something that we did probably about a month ago with the Carolina Leadership Academy. And there were several Carolina coaches who had already had a very well established set of core values that were all over their locker rooms and had bag tags for them. And there were others that maybe were had them in their heads as coaches. But if I were to, and one of the challenges I gave them is if I show up at your practice today and I asked your athletes, what are your core values? What do you think they're going to say? So it was interesting because a lot of them were probably like, well, not a lot of them, but a portion of them were like, well, yeah, I don't know what they'd actually say. So they weren't really sure how well those core values had been established and communicated. Whereas others of them, you talk about North Carolina women's soccer, they evaluate each other on their core values. And they also then, their biggest reward or award at the end of the year isn't their MVP award. It's actually the people who best live their core values as voted on or as determined by their teammates. So that's a whole different level of taking your core values and really embedding them into your program. And then the last part we talk about are the standards. What are those actual behaviors that are going to lead us to where we want to go, that are all about our culture? And then what are those ones that, you know what, we can't have in this program, whether they're on the field or whether they're off the field? These kind of things aren't going to give us the reputation that we want to have, aren't going to get us to where we want to go as a program. So I think really investing the time, not spending the time, but investing the time to do that as a coaching staff, and then to hopefully involve some of the key mature leaders on your team is a really critical way of starting to bring that in. And then at some point, that might be something you do with parents as well and have them talk about what is our vision? What do we really want to accomplish with your son or daughter's participation in this sport? What are the values that we're going to have, especially when things aren't going our way, especially when we've lost a few games, or especially when little Johnny or Susie, your son, isn't getting the playing time that he or she you want them to have and they want to have? How are we going to handle that? And then what are our standards and expectations? So yeah, it's stuff that does take some time, but I always tell coaches, the more time you invest in this, the less issues you're usually going to have somewhere down the road because you've already worked through these things and talked through these things and established this is what we want to be.
Jeff, let me ask you, man, just candidly, why aren't coaches doing this? To me, you say this stuff, I'm doing this, we're both doing this stuff, we're traveling around helping coaches with this. And when a coach isn't doing this, I just kind of scratch my head like, why aren't you doing this? Because to me, it's so obvious. Why do you think some coaches aren't doing this?
Yeah, I think that there's so many coaches that, the X's and O's, the strategy part of the game, that's the part maybe that they're more comfortable with. They love to sit down and diagram or watch video or scout or do things like that. And that it's definitely an important part of the game. But I think as time goes on, coaches and people are starting to see it's more than just the X's and O's. And the teams that really are successful at a high level, yes, their X's and O's are strong and really good, but at the same time, they've built a program that transcends those X's and O's. So I think that's part of it. And I know a lot of high school coaches, just from a timing standpoint, they've got other things going on. Their athletes have other things going on. So a lot of times these intangible things kind of get placed to the back burner and they aren't thought about honestly until they're biting you in the butt. And it's like, oh, yeah, we probably should have established our values a little more so at the beginning because now we've got our best athlete who's just running all over our values. And the rest of the team and the parents are looking at me like, what are you going to do about this? And if we had done some of this work proactively on the front end, maybe we wouldn't have been in this difficult situation now. So a lot of times it doesn't become evident to them until it's a huge problem and potentially derailing their season.
I think as coaches, it's one thing to have this vision, to have these core values, and to have these our athletes memorize them and have them in their head. But we don't want them to be robots either. I like this idea, Jeff, of I want it to go from their head to their heart. I want them to something that they not only know, but they live. They live these values. What's your process like to make sure it goes from, yes, you're memorizing, I know it's up here cognitively. How do we get in your heart so you live this out? I think one of the mistakes that we could make as coaches and as leaders is to create these great documents and have these visions, and they're all over the locker room, and it's phenomenal. Yet we're not living it. We're just repeating it robotically. How do we go from head to heart?
Yeah, I think you've got to have your athletes buy-in in this process. It can't just be a coach, "Oh, I'm going to put these together. Yeah, that's a great core value. I'm going to put them in my words and phrases, and then I'm going to plaster them up all over the place and hand them all out." It's kind of a coach imposed value system. And I think that it's better when you can get your athletes' participation in it and get their buy-in to it and use their words. Colby Hale, who is coaching at Arkansas soccer, when he sat down and did their core values, he wanted their phrases for it. So exceed expectations was one. Beat for we. So they're going to have their own terms of teamwork and unity and all those things that maybe the adults and coaches would have. Hand them over to your kids, and how would you say that? What really connects with you and resonates with you, your heart, as you're talking about, that this is meaningful for you? So I think the more you can involve them, put them in their words, and then if you're doing some video stuff, show examples of these. Hey, here was a great example of someone exceeding expectations. Here was the standard that we wanted you to hit for our runtime. This person just blew it out of the water. Or we were doing this drill and we had to make 18 baskets in whatever time. You guys made 22 during that time. That's an example of exceeding expectations, and that's what's going to help us when we play our rival team coming up. So I think the more that you give them the language to use, the opportunity to do that, and then to show them those things and to highlight those things and call those out, and maybe have a person of the week who best exceeds those, or have one of your values each week that you're focusing on, and have maybe your team captain stand up and say, "We think these two people really exemplified these values for us this week, and this is how it made a difference for our program." I think those are ways of really taking it from on paper or from a nice thing that you have on a wall and bringing it into your practices.
I had the chance to speak with Coach Lonnie Almeida, the head softball coach at Florida State, about some of this. And one of the things she said was she tries to create a culture or an environment that's not coach fed, but player led, not coach fed, but player led. So that leads me to ask you, Jeff, what's kind of the relationship like between the coach creating these core values, this vision, this structure that he or she wants, but then also letting the athletes have some say on it? Is it something like every year it changes, or is it important that we have consistency, or is it, hey, the core values are always the same, but you guys come up with the standard? How much do you let the athlete in on it, and how much does it change from year to year?
It's a great question. I think it's the old quote, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. I think one is the maturity level of your athletes. Do you have very mature athletes who may already have a good understanding of what it takes to be successful? They've done it. Then I think there's a lot less tweaking that you may need to do because they're already bought into them, but you do give them a little more say and a little more leeway because, you do trust them and they do understand what it takes. If you are coming into a new program, as we talked about initially, and you've got some people that you question their maturity or their buy-in, you as a coach are probably going to take a little more of the lion's share of the role in doing that. So I think it depends upon, as I said, the maturity level, what your success level has been as a program, how well these people have exemplified these values and standards that you have. I know we mentioned Carolina soccer. Anson would sit down with his seniors each year and say, here's the core values that we've done in the past. Do you want to switch these around a little bit? Is there one you either want to add or take out? Is there a new kind of quote that we want to add to this? So how can we make this team's set of core values versus last year's team's core values? So those are, I think, are just some different ways of looking at, okay, how can we keep these fresh and new so that they apply to this year's team? So I think giving them that opportunity to adjust things, but within reason. Obviously, if it's been working for you, you're not going to make wholesale changes, but you're going to make some probably tweaks so that it fits this year's team a little bit better than last year's team. That's one thing I worked with Minnesota, or still am working with Minnesota women's basketball, and we talked about their different standards and what they wanted to call them. And some of them, definitely were more of the championship kind of level standard. Some were not locked, some were bottom of the Big Ten standard, so which they didn't want to be. So using their phraseology for it helps them see, okay, yeah, that's bottom of the Big Ten behavior. We can't have that in our program.
So Jeff, I'm in Minnesota. We have a lot of Minnesota fans. Is there
No
something
good.
that you could, I don't know how much is secret sauce and stuff that you can't let out, but what's something that maybe you learned from those guys? What's something you're working with? I think my audience being in Minnesota would love to hear maybe something that they're working on. Is there something you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, I think, Coach Dawn Plitzwhite has done a fabulous job with a variety of programs through the years as she's built programs. She's a great program builder and understands what it takes to be successful. And I think one of the things that she's done is say, okay, as we build this program, this goes back to what we talked about before of where we've been, where we want to be. Yeah, we want to be competing for Big Ten championships. Now, is that where their program is in their second year that she has it there? Maybe not. So what they're going to look at is, okay, if we're going to make the NCAA tournament, what are the top teams, what are the top half teams in the Big Ten doing in terms of their stats in a game? What are they shooting? What are they holding opponents to? What do their turnovers look like? What do their rebounds look like? All those things. So as they evaluate games, they look at, okay, how did our stats match up with teams in the top half of the Big Ten? Because that's at least the standard that we're going for right now, where we are with our program. And eventually that's going to continue to rise as she builds the program as well. But those are some key things I think that it's important to do, is to look at, okay, if we want to be at this level, this is the level we have to compete at, not only in games, but we have to have that same kind of a level and standard in our practices, in our workouts, in our weight room. So it's all those standards, and then sharing that with the team, and the team obviously saying, okay, yeah, if we want to be at this level, this is the standard that we need to hold ourselves to. This is the standard we need to hold each other to. And that's all part of that process of building a program up and taking it to a higher level.
Jeff, I love that thought process, because what's the alternative? The alternative is coach says, hey, we just need to get better. We need to get better. You guys need to get better at rebounding. You need to get better. And it's kind of like, okay, I mean, that as an athlete, like for one, that just gets sick and tired of hearing the same thing. Like, we just need to improve. Give me some data. Give me some metrics. Like, what are you looking for, coach? What is satisfactory? And so working backwards using the data, because the data is everywhere, right? It's all over the internet. So just find, where do you want to go? Work yourself backwards. What a great piece of information that doesn't need to be just in college. At pretty much any level, you can kind of pick apart, what are the best doing? Okay, this is where we are. This is how far we are away. We need to double down on this area. Maybe we're closer than we think we are offensively, but defensively, we're way off. So we need to put more practice time on, it really gives you some answers to the test as a coach, doesn't it?
Exactly. And it gives you the standard you got to hit. And now you have to own it and say, okay, at halftime right now, we've allowed them to shoot 53% from the field. That we're not going to get a win that way. We have got to tighten up our defense. We've got to close out better. We've got to get a hand up and make them take tougher shots, because if they keep shooting 53% for the rest of this game, we're going to have a hard time winning this game. So here's how we do that. So yeah, it does. It breaks it down into offense, into defense. What are the key battles that win the war? And if we can win these key battles, then we really put ourselves in a great position to win the overall war. Does it happen all the time? No, but we know if we take care of these battles 80% of the time, 90% of the time, no matter which team we're playing, whether it's the top team in the Big Ten or the bottom team in the Big Ten, we're probably going to put ourselves in a great position to win this game.
Man, we're 25 minutes in. This is an absolute masterclass for coaches out there. Let's keep rolling. So I think we got a really good kind of base of building and sustaining a championship culture. You have a ton of books on there, listeners out. If you want to go deeper, there's a lot more information, but we're going to just keep things rolling, go a little fly overview here. The next piece I think that's important that I want to attack with you is developing effective team leaders. So let's say we're kind of following this chronological age of the coach, if you will. Now they've kind of got some systems, they've got their core values, and now their next step, I think, is developing the effective team leaders. You have a quote in one of your books that says, "Great leaders develop other leaders, not followers. They build people who can think, act, and lead independently." Let's start really big and then we can dive in a little bit deeper. What is your pieces of advice for coaches to develop effective team leaders?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said before, is that a lot of times coaches want good leaders, but maybe they haven't really invested the time to develop them. Just like any physical skills or any strategies, you don't just show up on game day, oh, I hope our team runs our offense well. Well, if you didn't practice it during the week, it probably isn't going to look all that great out there on game day. Same thing with leaders. If you don't invest the time to develop them, the off season, preseason, early season are really the best times to do that, because obviously once you're in season, things are crazy and you're more putting out fires and they more have to apply leadership rather than learn leadership. So one of the things that we did now, we've got 21 years of the Carolina Leadership Academy. They were really one of the first schools to create a comprehensive leadership academy for their student athletes and coaches. And Mike Fox was their baseball coach back then. He said, you know what? My best teams occurred when my best athlete was also my best leader. And I think that is a powerful combination when you respect a kid because of their talent and they're getting it done results wise, and they're one of your best leaders. They're coming in early, they're staying late, they're picking up kids who are struggling, they're holding people accountable when they haven't done what they've done. It just has a really big influence, not only on your success, but your culture, your confidence, everything else with the team. So we said, you know what we should do is we put together this program is we should get our youngest, best athletes when they're maybe freshmen, sophomores mostly, to add that aspect of leadership. It's almost like the minor leagues of leadership. So we created in the Carolina Leadership Academy an emerging leaders program for sophomores who have high potential as leaders, who are probably some of your best athletes. And we spend their entire sophomore year basically going through our team captain's leadership manual and taking them and teaching them, this is how you lead yourself. This is how you become one of the hardest workers on the team. This is how you maintain your composure when the stuff is hitting the fan. This is how you build your confidence. This is how you make good character decisions in your sport and away from your sport. And then obviously now, how do you start to lead your teammates to do those things? So the time that we invested in building those leaders is something that definitely pays off not only that sophomore year, but has big dividends that junior year and that senior year. Now you may have that best athlete, best leader. Now you've got a core group of leaders who say, this is how we do things in our program. This is the standard. This is the expectation. When you fall below that, we don't do that here. We need you up here. And when you do hit that standard or exceed that standard, hey, great job. That's what we're all about. So it's a very intentional, systematic, comprehensive approach. And not only do we have the Emerging Leaders Program, we also have the Veteran Leaders Program. Now that you're a veteran leader, you've learned how to lead yourself, you've learned how to lead your teammates. Now, how are you going to work with the coaching staff to build that culture that we need to have, to call out the people when they are doing the right thing and to call up the people when they're doing the wrong thing, and then very consistent communication with those leaders. One of the things that we do as part of the Leadership Academy is we bring the coaches in, we bring the veteran leaders in, we bring the emerging leaders in, and we look at, where's your team's commitment right now? Who's really committed and bringing this forward? Who are some people that maybe started the year committed, but because they haven't gotten the playing time they wanted or the role that they have, they've kind of drifted down in their commitment. And what can we do? Why did that happen? What can we do to re-engage them so that they can be pulling in the right direction? So a lot of then great communication between the coaches, and we're going to and captains, and we're going to co-lead this team. It's not just, okay, coach, it's your team, you go lead the team, or captains here, it's your team, you go lead the team. But the more we can do this together, being on the same page, the more effective everybody's going to be.
I love this topic. I would love to double click on it. What I see a lot of times is in my arena, at least Jeff, is we name the team leader, team captain. We say congratulations, and then that's it. They wear
Yep.
the C, and then when things go awry, we're kind of wondering, well, why aren't you fixing this? I gave you this captain opportunity, or you're not talking a lot, vocal, or you're supposed to be vocal, you're not doing, and there's just this drop off, right? And I'm passionate about it because it needs to be fixed, where we just name them captain, and then we say good luck, congratulations, you can put it on your resume. There's no follow through without bringing you in and going through some of this other stuff. What are some of the just bottom line things, Jeff, that my coaches can do to help develop leaders? I'm going to assume one of them is communication, having consistent talks with them, some one-on-one conversations. Are there some other just low-hanging fruits that my coaches can do to develop team leaders?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we did early on is create the team captain's leadership manual, and it's got 10 different modules in it. It's got an evaluation at the very early part that the leader can do on him or herself and take a look at. Okay, how am I in terms of my commitment? Where am I in terms of my confidence, my composure, my character? How much am I a servant leader? How am I in terms of building team? Am I willing to be an enforcer when people aren't doing what they should be doing? So it gives them a chance to evaluate on 24 questions where they are, where they think their strengths might be. And then there's also one for the coach to do that same evaluation on the leader. And sometimes you may have people who are like, oh, well, I thought this was one of my strengths, and this is an area really that, coach, you feel like I need to work on. Or sometimes the opposite occurs. Sometimes you have a leader who's really hard on themselves, and the coach is saying, well, no, I'm having you a leader. I want you to speak up because you do have the respect and trust of everyone else. So we need you to be more vocal. So that evaluation is a great communication tool then to see, okay, where am I? And then the whole book then obviously has 10 different modules in it that you can say, okay, if you're really struggling maintaining your composure when things aren't going well, we now have a whole chapter with exercises and ideas in it that you can apply to you and everyone else. So that gives them then practical tools that can really dive into the areas that they may be struggling with, as well as give them some tips on the areas that maybe they're doing well, but just need some other ideas on. So that's what's kind of developed. And then what happened with this is a lot of coaches said, well, I've got people who have to just work on leading themselves. So what we ended up doing is creating like a 6 series sports leadership development series. So there's the responsibility manual that I think a lot of athletes don't even understand what it means to take responsibility for yourself. There's the accountability manual. How do I be accountable to my teammates? We talked a little bit about the commitment manual already. Where are we in terms of commitment? And then there's the culture building stuff. And the area that I see most leaders struggle in is holding other people accountable. If somebody's not doing what they should be doing, a lot of leaders are like, well, that's my friend or that's my teammate. And I don't want to step on toes. I don't want them mad at me. Maybe that's my coach's job. They should be doing it. So a lot of times they see things slipping and trending in the wrong direction, especially away from practices when the coach isn't around. And the coach is like, oh, I need you to call out that stuff and to police that stuff. But the kids are just so uncomfortable doing it, they just kind of watch it nosedive. And there goes the season because nobody was willing to confront that stuff.
I so bad want to get into the accountability piece in a moment. I would love to just go a little deeper on the difference between vocal leaders and lead by example leaders might be the best term for that. I
Mhm.
think some things that coaches struggle with is that they want leaders that are vocal because I think, to be honest, the old school mentality of a captain is the rah-rah speeches, the people that are going to get you fired up. They're going to be the ones that do a lot of the talking. But I think maybe now more than ever, at least what I'm seeing is there's a lot more lead by example student athletes because with anxiety and everything else going out there, that rah-rah person is hard to find. You maybe get one every couple years. So I'm curious, how can coaches have a better kind of mindset and frame towards understanding that there are two different kinds? And then also, is the point to try to get one to go to the other? Are you trying to move a kid who is a silent leader to a vocal leader and one to the other? How do you go about that process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's one of the things that we do in this captain's manual in our leadership academies as well. Is we start with the premise that you first have to be able to lead yourself effectively, not perfectly, but effectively. Because if you can't lead yourself, you're not going to have the respect of your coaches or the trust of your teammates if you're not doing it. You can't tell somebody else, "Hey, you got to work harder," and they look at you and you're like one of the laziest people on the team. Or you got to maintain your composure, and you're one of the most stressed out, nervous people there. Or you got to make some better decisions away from your sport, and they're looking at your social life and they're like, you don't do that yourself. So that's what we always say. All leadership starts with self-leadership. You have to be able to lead yourself first in order to develop that credibility with your team. And for 16, 17, 18, or 20, 21, 22-year-old people, that's a hard enough challenge in its own right. I mean, there's a lot of adults who struggle with their composure or struggle with their character or struggle with their commitment or their confidence. So a lot of high school and college kids are certainly going to struggle with that as well. So we really focus on that aspect first, that you've got to get your own house in order before you're going to have the opportunity and the privilege to help other people. And then as we talk about as becoming more of a vocal leader, one of the things that you're going to do when you see great commitment or great confidence or composure or character from your teammates, you're going to call that out. And that for a lot of people is an easier thing to do. It's easy to give people praise. It's easy to say, "Hey, great job in that." That's an easier skill for leaders. So for those who are reluctant to be vocal, that's where I'm going to start them is, hey, if you see one of your teammates doing the right thing, acknowledge that,
Oh, cool.
praise them for it, say great job. That is one aspect of leadership that's pretty simple and is pretty easy. The tougher one, as we talked about, is holding people accountable. When you don't see people doing what they should be doing, then what I try to talk with them about is you're not calling them out, you're calling them up. You're calling them up. This is our standard that we talked about. Hopefully, the coaches have done that. These are the things that we're trying to be as a team. And we need you up here. Remember, we said that was going to help get us toward that conference championship. That was going to help us be one of the most respected teams here in our school. This is the level where we need you. And hey, you were down here. We've got to have you up here. As far as leadership development, one of the things that we do in our leadership academies is we kind of see this as, again, more of a stair step approach. So you just go from a normal athlete to, okay, how can I now become a leader by example? So normal athlete here, now how can I lead by example? Well, that goes back to my commitment, my confidence, my composure, my character. So, okay, now I've got me leading by example. That's one step that I've made from just regular athlete to now I'm an athlete who leads by example. Okay, now my coach is wanting me to be more vocal. I don't know if I can do that. This is where I talked about before. When you see good commitment, confidence, composure, character, work ethic from a teammate, all you got to do is call that out, praise them. That starts you into that vocal leadership. And what we do is we break vocal leadership down into an encourager and an enforcer. And the encourager is the positive one. Obviously, great job on what you're doing. A lot of athletes, if they're reluctant to be vocal, we can move them into, hey, just one-on-one, praise one of your teammates. And that goes back to, as you talked about, they want these, maybe some coaches are thinking these great rousing speeches to the entire team. Well, no, just find one teammate and call them out in a positive way for what they're doing. So that's one level that we're going to now get you up to is we've got you a vocal leader, but you're just doing the encourager part. We'll take it, but we also, if we want to continue to develop you, we now have to take you to that enforcer part of it now too. So now you're not seeing good commitment, confidence, composure, character, whatever from your teammates. Here's where you have to now say, this is the standard that we have. And again, you're not trying to put somebody in their place. You're not on this power trip. You're simply reminding people this is the standard that we need to be successful. I'm seeing you here. I'm calling you up to here. I know you can do it. I've seen you do it before. We've got to have you do it if our team is going to be successful and have the culture that we want to have and maybe win our conference or state championships. We've got to have you here. And that's why I'm bringing this up, because if I let you do this, everybody else is going to see you getting away with that. And they think now our new standards here, and they're going to start doing it. And they're going to wonder, why am I not calling you out? Because you're not at that standard. So it's kind of explaining to them, hey, I'm doing this because these are the standards that we need to have. And I'm just doing this for your benefit and our team's benefit. So, and now if you've got a core group of leaders who are doing this, and meeting with these individuals who are not doing what they should be doing, and they've got the respect, they've got the trust, they've got leaders who are doing these things themselves and exceeding those standards, it's more likely not to be kids rolling their eyes at their teammates. So somebody's calling me out on this. It's okay. Yeah, I understand. I just had a rough day. I understand. I got to get back to where we need to be, where we all agreed to be.
I love the sentence, we're not calling you out, we're calling you up. I actually wrote about that in my book. And one of my favorite questions to ask teams when I'm in a team setting is I'll explain that topic. I'll have the teammates talk about that to each other, like, what does that mean? But then the next question I say is, what does that sound like on this team? And get them really to think about, like, what's the terminology or what are the pocket phrases that we want to use? Something like, hey, that's not the Panther way, or that's not how we do things around. Like, have them really come up with what are the words that we're going to use so we all know that, okay, when Dave says this to me, I know he's calling me up, not calling me out, and get really clear on what some of those words are. What are your thoughts on creating that kind of environment that we all know, hey, when we say this, this is what we mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big parts that we do in our training as well is put them into these real life difficult situations. You got a teammate slacking off in practices, you got a teammate who is cutting corners in the weight room. How are you going to handle those situations? And we do have them role play those things of, we need more from you right now, or you're better than that. Yeah, coming up with some phrases that really characterize, this is where we need you to be. You're here. This is, I'm calling you up to that higher standard. So yeah, giving them, I think, concrete phrases helps make it easier. It's like throwing them a lifeline when they're all, oh, I don't want to call out my teammate and do that. It's feel like they're drowning. It's like throwing them a lifeline. Here, use this phrase. And your intent in doing that is to let them know we need more from you in this situation. So I think it does help them, gives them some tools to be more effective in those difficult situations.
I love this tweet that you put out some time ago, and I think it really nails in what we're talking about. You say that 95 to 99% of teams say they want to win championships. 15 to 20% of teams actually understand what it takes to win championships. 10 to 15% of teams consistently do what it takes to win championships. 5 to 10% of teams effectively lead others to do what it takes to win championships. And then 2 to 5% of teams reliably hold others accountable to do what it takes to win championships. So we look at kind of the tip of the spear here, that 2 to 5%. Everybody says they want to win championships. We see that all the time. We hear it all the time. The first day of practice is everybody hands in championship or state on 3. But what you're saying to me is 2 to 5% of the teams you work with or have been across reliably hold others accountability to do what it takes to win championships. That's got to be a huge, huge focus here, is delivering on how to hold others accountable, not even as a team leader, but also as a coach?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, if your coaches who are watching this right now are looking for practical things of where's our program right now, that tweet's probably one is number one. How many of your kids say they want to win a championship? And as you said, it's going to be a high percentage are going to profess, oh yeah, we definitely want to do that. And then take a look at, as we look at our roster right now, how many of our kids really understand what it takes? And what I try to do, I've got a book as well, What It Takes to Win Championships, and what is the mentality it's going to take to win championships? What kind of mental frame do we have to be in throughout the season? What kind of culture, which we've been talking about, and what kind of level of execution, which probably goes a little into the Minnesota women's basketball stuff that we talked about as well. What standard of operation do we need to have if we're going to compete with those higher teams? So as you're looking at your team, you're like, okay, well, we don't even understand what it takes. So I can't even focus on holding people accountable. I got to really focus on teaching them what it actually takes to get there. What is that mentality? What is that culture? What is that execution? So that's what I tried to do in that book, is to really focus on, okay, number one, we have to just help them understand what it takes. Then once there's at least a decent understanding of what it takes, now do we have leaders who are consistently doing that in practices, in the off season, in all these different venues that we're going to be in? So we have to get them to that uh, leadership level. And then once they're actually doing it, now when they see teammates below that, are they holding them accountable to it? And I think that's one thing, as I said, your coaches can do is, where are we as a program right now? Do we have people who I mean, you might even go back before that. You might not even have enough kids who say they want to win a championship. This is just something fun. We're doing it because our friends are out here and all that. So you might not even have a sufficient number who say they actually want to win a championship. And that goes back to vision, values, and standards. Maybe that's not the job you should be in right now. If you definitely want to win one of those, then do we understand it? Do we have people who lead and do it? And then do we have people who hold us accountable to it? So that just gives your coaches maybe a good framework to say, where are we right now? And you can't start trying to hold people accountable if you don't even have the people who understand what it takes right now.
I'm curious, Jeff, what does it look like to hold coaches accountable? What does it look like for a coach to hold another coach accountable? I think this is something that probably doesn't get talked about enough, but certainly happens sometimes. What are your thoughts on that? What's your experience on when a coach isn't being held accountable?
Yeah, I think it's important too to look at what are the expectations and what are the standards of the coach. And when you're putting together a staff, it's really important to say, okay, do we have alignment with our commitment levels and with our vision and with our values and our standards? And it's important to really understand those things on the front end. I can give you examples of coaches who maybe had to have a quote quick hire and hired someone because they needed them to take care of stuff. But then within 2 weeks, they found out, oh boy, this person is not a fit with my vision or my values or my standards. And yeah, I needed to have a quick hire, but I probably should have taken another week or two to find the right person rather than the most efficient or quickest, easiest person to go with. So, yeah, I think it's the same thing, being really clear about what the expectations are. And one of the things that I put together, I think it's probably on my website as well, is the 12 essentials of effective assistant coaches and what it takes if you're going to be an effective coach. And we have assistant coaches rate themselves on those different things. Where do you think you are? Have the head coach rate them, and then there's a great opportunity for some discussion. Obviously, that's best done preseason or after the season, but if things are really difficult within the season, then that might be an opportunity to do that as well.
I love this idea of holding other people, whether it's coaches or athletes, accountable. Is there anything we missed or anything else that's important in that arena when it comes to, I mean, I know there's a lot in there. There's a whole book on it. Is there anything else that we missed?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the whole concept of holding people accountable. People think, well, I just come down on them hard. That's the step. And what I did with this book, How to Hold People Accountable, or the How to Hold People Accountable manual, is I put in 7 different steps. And it's like you have to do steps 1 through 6 in order to have the credibility then to enforce your standards. If you have forgotten steps 1 through 6 with this whole thing, that's going to fall flat when you try to jump to that other one. And a lot of it hits on the things that we've talked about already. What are your visions, values, standards? Are you exemplifying those visions? Do you have buy-in to what those standards are? Are you calling out the people who are hitting those standards? And all those different things. If you're not doing those important early steps, holding people accountable and coming down hard on them isn't going to work. So that's, I think, the misconception for a lot of people is we just jump to step 7 and hold them accountable. It's like, no, there had to have been some groundwork and some different foundations that you've put in. So now when you hold somebody accountable, they're actually probably going to nod their head and say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. You're right. I have to step up. This is what we agreed to. You're doing it yourself. You're coming at me not in a way to attack me, but to remind me of what these standards are. Yeah, you're right. I got to step up and do that versus, no way, you haven't done it yourself. Nobody told me I had to do this. A defensive posture because, yeah, you didn't put in steps 1 through 6. That's why they're so defensive.
The holding each other accountable too is so hard, especially for student athletes, especially in high school, because there's a friendship thing, there's a social status thing, there's a he or she's the popular kid thing. Like that's such a hard part for people to get past where it's like, if I can just ignore this for 2 hours every day, it's fine because I don't want to have it impact what I think is the rest of my life from Monday through Friday or the weekends. That's such a huge part.
It definitely is. And you add the college level, they're often roommates with each other.
Yeah.
So not only do I have to have this issue on the field, I got to go home and deal with them. And they drank all my milk and they didn't replace that after they did. So you've got now it's almost a 24/7 thing with them versus, yeah, in high school, a lot of times, unless it's a brother sister kind of thing, they may not be a teammate with them. So yeah, it's even another layer of, yeah, that's my roommate as well. We all live in the same house together.
My last question, Jeff, I'm so eager to hear your answer. It's called the $1 million question. It goes like this. What do you know now that you wish you knew a few decades ago before you got into the work that you're in right now? And I usually take out the answer of there's nothing that I would say. I have no regrets. I'm not asking if you have any regrets. What do you know now about the work that you're doing that you wish you knew a few decades ago before you got into the space?
Yeah, I mean, obviously things are changing tremendously, especially in the college sports world as things continue to go on. I think when and I was saying this to an athlete the other day, when I first came into the college level, I thought, okay, everybody's going to be lined up. Everybody's going to want to get better. They're going to be overturning and every single rock, and their nutrition's going to be great. And they're just going to want to be competing at this elite level and get every advantage they can and mental train and leadership development. And there are not a lot of people who are wired that way. The elite ones are. I was talking to, it was a lacrosse player at Carolina who was very, very successful for them and is now coaching. And she's like, yeah, it kind of surprised me that not everyone is wired this way. And it's true that the really elite ones are wired that way. They're looking to get better all the time. They're overturning every rock. But it kind of goes back to those percentages we talked about before. It's probably only 2 or 5% of them. The rest of them kind of need some encouragement, kind of need some confidence, kind of need some motivation, kind of need a plan laid out for them so that these are the steps and they can gain that understanding. Then they may not totally ever be wired the same way some elite athletes are, but people can grow. I've seen people grow in their mental training. I've seen people grow in their leadership. I've seen coaches grow. So that's the thing. I think that's why we all do this is we get to see people grow, not only as athletes, but as students and people in this whole process. And that's what's exciting. And we know as time goes on in the rest of their life, they're going to develop other leaders. Going back to that other quote, they're going to help other people grow. And it's just going to lift the tide of all boats as we do this.
Man, Jeff, this is an absolute masterclass. I like to also end with a call to action. There's a lot of things, a lot of great items in this conversation. What's one thing, I know it depends. What's one thing that my high school coaches can go do today to improve either themselves or improve their programs? Obviously, we're going to promote the book. We're going to definitely get any of these books. They're all phenomenal. But what's a call to action that my coaches can do today? What's one thing that they could take away and go do?
Yeah, I think if they haven't already, to really sit down and understand what is my vision for this program? What does it look like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now? What are my values? What are the values that I would actually lose games for because I know if I maintain these values, it's going to help me win in the long run and it's going to align with who I am as a person, what my values are, and then what are my standards, as we talked about before. I think if you don't have those down, put them down on paper, and then to really reflect how much do my teams, how much do my athletes, my parents, my administrators, how much do they align with those values as well?
Jeff, this is awesome. How can my coaches best support you? For the coaches that you have a ton of books, which books do you think would hit well with my coaches specifically?
Yeah, I think the one that's really popular with coaches is how to build and sustain a championship culture. That takes a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, puts it into a blueprint that coaches can use. And then the other one is the Team Captain's Leadership Manual to really help you, give you a process. And it's best to work through that with the leaders themselves. Assign them a chapter each week, have a group of your leaders get together, talk about, hey, what really connected with you from that chapter? What pertains to you? What pertains to us as a team? How can we apply this? And that's the whole way that it's written is how do we use this for our team so that we can get better with our culture and with our leadership?
Jeff, your wealth of knowledge, man. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on.